In this article in Antipode, I examine what happens when climate crisis is imagined as inevitable. I do this by introducing the idea of anticipatory ruination, a discursive and material process of social and ecological destruction in anticipation of real or perceived threats. I demonstrate that this process is common to discourses of climate crisis and adaptation. Through anticipatory ruination, global discourses of climate crisis can produce the very threats that they anticipate. In the paper, I explore anticipatory ruination through an examination of climate change adaptation programming and discourses in Khulna, a district in Bangladesh's southern coastal region. Often referred to as one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change in the world, Khulna is experiencing a great variety of ecological changes, and it is also home to the greatest density of climate change adaptation programs in the country. A popular dystopic narrative about Khulna among development and government officials and journalists holds that rapid sea level rise will result in ecological devastation in Khulna and rapid outmigration of climate refugees. I argue that these discourses create opportunities to promote development interventions that result in social and ecological destruction for the communities where they take place. One example of this is the promotion of shrimp aquaculture in Khulna. Many in the government and donor communities have begun promoting shrimp aquaculture as a climate change adaptation strategy, as a means of creating an opportunity out of a threat. Because shrimp can be cultivated in saline soils, the idea here is that it should be promoted in areas that are experiencing increased soil salinity and sea level rise. Yet, shrimp aquaculture is itself a cause of many of the social and ecological dynamics that are commonly referred to as the result of climate change. It has wreaked havoc on local ecologies, killing trees, hurting subsistence production, and crippling agriculture. It requires dramatically less labor, which means that significant numbers of landless people and sharecroppers are displaced and forced to migrate out of their villages for work. These changes, salinated soils, ecological destruction, massive outmigration, are all said to be impacts of climate change in Khulna. In this way, shrimp aquaculture contributes to many of the social and ecological changes it claims to avert. It is in that sense that this case demonstrates the process of anticipatory ruination. Carried out through shrimp aquaculture, anticipatory ruination both responds to and produces Bangladesh's climate crisis. In the article, I use the concept to explore not only the dynamics taking place in Khulna, but also the ways in which climate crisis is constituted more broadly. This happens through all kinds of discourses of climate crisis that suggest the necessity of ruination in anticipation of climate change. In the article, I examine several examples of how this process is carried out from the local to the global scale. This work builds on a long tradition in political ecology of examining how ideas about adaptation can obscure the causes of ecological vulnerability and prevent structural analyses and possible responses. More recent work in the field has examined struggles over spatial imaginaries of climate crisis and adaptation. This work suggests new ways of thinking about political struggles over what the future will look like under climate change. Communities in Khulna, for example, contest this process of anticipatory ruination by mobilizing against shrimp aquaculture, promoting a return to traditional rice agriculture and the agrarian political economies it supports. In some parts of the coastal region, these social movement groups have successfully organized to return to rice farming, demonstrating that this crisis is not inevitable. This success suggests a radically different vision of rural futures in the time of climate change than those that facilitate the process of anticipatory ruination. I argue that this success suggests new ways of thinking about climate justice. By looking to social movements to identify alternative spatial imaginaries of climate change, we might identify alternatives to the dystopic futures engendered by narratives of inevitable climate crisis.